dare you accuse me in front of everyone?
I am merely stating the facts, sir.
The grand ballroom of the Metropolitan Hotel gleamed under crystal chandeliers, each table adorned with centerpieces worth more than most people's monthly salary. Tonight was the annual Philanthropy Gala, where the city's elite gathered to congratulate themselves on their charitable contributions while dining on courses that cost more per plate than minimum wage. Workers earned in a day. Maya Johnson moved silently between the tables, her black uniform making her nearly invisible among the sea of designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. She balanced a silver tray with practiced ease, refilling champagne glasses and clearing plates with the precision of someone who had perfected the art of being present but unseen. "Excuse me, miss?" A sharp voice cut through the ambient chatter. Maya turned to see Mrs. Victoria Whitmore, wife of real estate mogul Charles Whitmore, holding up an empty glass with obvious irritation. "I've been waiting for a refill for 5 minutes. Do you people even know what customer service means?" "Of course, ma'am. My apologies." Maya's voice remained steady, professional, as she filled the woman's glass. Around the table, other guests barely glanced up from their conversations about yacht purchases and European vacations. "And make sure it's properly chilled this time," Mrs. Whitmore added loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "I swear, the help they hire these days." Maya nodded politely and moved on, catching the knowing smirks exchanged between the Whitmores and their table-mates. She had worked events like this for 3 years, and the script was always the same. To them, she was furniture that occasionally moved and served drinks. At the head table, Billionaire CEO Marcus Blackwood commanded attention, as he always did. His tech empire, Blackwood Industries, had made him one of the youngest self-made billionaires in the country. Tonight, he was being honored for his commitment to social justice and equality, a commitment that came with significant tax benefits and positive press coverage. "Ladies and gentlemen," Blackwood's voice boomed through the microphone as he stood to address the crowd. "Tonight, we celebrate not just our achievements, but our responsibility to lift up those less fortunate. My company has always believed that success means nothing without giving back to our communities." Applause thundered through the ballroom. Maya paused in her service, listening to words that sounded beautiful but felt hollow. She watched as guests nodded approvingly, their faces glowing with self-satisfaction. "That's why I'm proud to announce Blackwood Industries' new initiative," he continued. "A $50 million fund dedicated to supporting underprivileged youth in technology education. Because every child, regardless of their background, deserves a chance to reach for the stars." More applause. Maya noticed how none of these philanthropists seemed to notice the servers, the kitchen staff, the security guards, all the underprivileged people literally serving them at this very moment. As Blackwood returned to his seat, Maya approached his table to refill water glasses. She moved carefully, having learned that even the slightest mistake at these events could result in complaints to management and lost hours. "Water, sir?" she asked quietly. Blackwood didn't look up from his conversation with the city's mayor. "Yeah, whatever," he muttered, waving dismissively. As Maya leaned forward to pour, her sleeve accidentally brushed against his phone, which was lying face up on the table. The screen lit up, revealing a text message that made her blood run cold. "Discrimination lawsuit settled. 2.3 keep it quiet. Legal." Her hand trembled slightly as she continued pouring, but years of professional training kept her expression neutral. She had seen something she wasn't supposed to see, something that contradicted everything this man had just said about equality and justice. "Careful there," Blackwood said sharply, finally looking at her as a drop of water landed near his phone. "Do you know how much this suit costs?" "No, sir, I'm sorry, sir," Maya replied, quickly dabbing the water with her cloth. "More than you make in a year, I guarantee that." His comment drew chuckles from his table mates. Maybe pay attention to what you're doing instead of gawking at things that don't concern you. Maya felt heat rise in her cheeks, but maintained her composure. Of course, sir. Again, my apologies. As she moved away from the table, she caught fragments of conversation. Employment discrimination is such a headache these days. People looking for handouts, playing the race card. Thank God we have good lawyers to handle these situations. The irony wasn't lost on her. Here was a man being celebrated for his commitment to equality, while casually discussing paying millions to cover up discrimination, and treating her with barely concealed contempt in the process. Maya continued her rounds, but her mind was racing. That text message, those conversations, they painted a very different picture of Marcus Blackwood than the one being presented to this adoring crowd. As she reached the service station near the kitchen doors, she overheard two other servers talking in hushed tones. "Did you hear about the lawsuit against Blackwood Industries last month?" "Which one?" "There have been like 3 this year." "The one where they fired that black woman engineer for performance issues right after she reported her supervisor for harassment." Maya's jaw tightened. The pieces were starting to form a picture she recognized all too well. She glanced back at the head table where Blackwood was now engaged in animated conversation, gesturing with the confidence of a man who believed he was untouchable. The crowd hung on his every word, seeing him as a visionary, a leader, a philanthropist. But Maya was beginning to see something else entirely. Do any of these people have any idea who they're really celebrating tonight? The evening progressed with the predictable rhythm of high society events. Course after course was served, each accompanied by speeches about charitable giving and social responsibility. Maya moved through the crowd like a ghost, invisible until someone needed something, then dismissed just as quickly. It was during the third course that things began to escalate. Maya was serving the Whitmore table when she overheard Charles Whitmore speaking in low tones to his dinner companion, a city council member named Robert Hayes. "The Blackwood situation is getting expensive," Whitmore muttered, cutting into his Wagyu beef. 3 settlements in 6 months. At some point, it becomes cheaper to just hire better lawyers up front. "What's the latest one?" Hayes asked, glancing around to ensure they weren't being overheard. Neither man noticed Maya standing just behind Whitmore's chair, refilling water glasses. "Some black kid in their coding division claims his manager called him boy and passed him over for promotions. Kid had documentation, recordings, the whole 9 yards. Marcus had to write a check for $2.3 million to make it go away." Maya's hand stilled on the water pitcher. That was the exact amount from the text message she'd seen. "Jesus," Hayes whispered. "And he's up there talking about equality?" "That's the beauty of it," Whitmore chuckled. "Nothing says I'm not racist like a big charity check. The media eats it up, the lawsuits disappear, and everybody wins. Except the people getting discriminated against? Well, they get paid too, don't they? What more do they want?" Maya felt her chest tighten with anger, but she forced herself to keep moving. She had learned long ago that reacting to these conversations would only cost her the job she desperately needed. But as she moved to the next table, she noticed Blackwood's assistant, a nervous-looking man named Peterson, approaching the billionaire with obvious urgency. "Sir, we have a problem," Peterson whispered, leaning close to Blackwood's ear. Maya positioned herself at the nearby service station, ostensibly organizing silverware while straining to listen. "What kind of problem?" Blackwood's voice carried a sharp edge. "Jennifer Martinez from Channel 7 is asking questions about the Johnson settlement. Somehow word leaked about the payout." Blackwood's face darkened. "I thought we had that contained." "We did. But someone talked. They're running a story tomorrow night about patterns of discrimination in tech companies. We're the lead example." Maya watched as Blackwood's carefully constructed public persona began to crack. His jaw clenched, His fingers drummed impatiently on the table. Get legal on the phone. See if we can kill the story. We tried. They have too much corroboration, multiple sources. Then we go with the backup plan. Charitable contribution to their scholarship fund. Make it big enough that they remember where their priorities lie. Peterson nodded and hurried away, but not before Maya caught the calculating look in Blackwood's eyes. This was a man who saw everything as a problem to be solved with money or power. As the evening continued, Maya began to notice a pattern. Every few minutes, someone would approach Blackwood with what appeared to be damage control updates. A city inspector who needed to be convinced to overlook certain violations. A former employee whose social media posts were becoming problematic. A journalist whose stories were hitting too close to home. The man, being celebrated for his integrity, was running a shadow operation designed to protect his reputation at any cost. During the dessert course, Maya was serving coffee when she overheard perhaps the most damning conversation yet. "Marcus, darling," cooed socialite Amanda Sterling, "I heard the most interesting rumor about your diversity initiatives." Blackwood's smile remained fixed, but Maya saw his shoulders tense. "Oh, what kind of rumor?" "Well, my husband's firm handles HR for several tech companies, and word is that your diversity hires have the shortest tenure in the industry. In and out within 6 months, most of them." "I'm sure that's just coincidence," Blackwood replied smoothly. "We have very high standards." "Of course you do. But it does make one wonder if all this equality talk is just for show, doesn't it?" Other guests at the table shifted uncomfortably. This was the kind of conversation that happened in private, not at public events. "I think my track record speaks for itself," Blackwood said, his voice carrying a warning tone. "My company has donated millions to minority education programs." "Oh, absolutely," Sterling backtracked quickly. "I wasn't suggesting anything improper, just noting interesting patterns, but Maya could see that the seed had been planted." Other guests were now looking at Blackwood with slightly different eyes, processing information they'd heard in whispered conversations throughout the evening. As Maya refilled Blackwood's coffee cup, she noticed his phone buzzing with incoming messages. She caught glimpses of the screen. Settlement with Williams finalized. 1.8 matters. Rodriguez case moved to arbitration. Confidentiality clause signed. Thompson threatening to go public. Need immediate intervention. Each message painted a clearer picture of a company spending millions not on preventing discrimination, but on hiding it. Maya's mind was racing. Here was one of the most powerful men in the city, being honored for his commitment to social justice, while simultaneously running what appeared to be a systematic cover-up operation. The hypocrisy was staggering, but more than that, it was dangerous. How many careers had been destroyed? How many people had been silenced with money and legal threats? As she moved away from his table, Maya overheard Blackwood speaking quietly into his phone. "I don't care what it costs. Kill the story. Buy the reporter if you have to. This cannot get out, especially not tonight." The man being celebrated as a champion of equality was actively working to suppress stories about his company's discrimination. The irony would have been laughable if it weren't so infuriating. Maya finished her rounds and retreated to the service area, her mind churning with everything she'd witnessed. She thought about all the times she'd been ignored, dismissed, treated as invisible by people like these. Tonight, that invisibility had given her a front-row seat to the truth. But what could she do with this information? She was just a server, a person these powerful individuals saw as furniture. Who would believe her word against that of a billionaire philanthropist? As she stood in the shadows, watching Blackwood accept another round of applause for his unwavering commitment to justice, Maya felt something shift inside her. The anger was still there, but it was being joined by something else: determination. These people thought she was powerless, invisible, irrelevant. They had no idea that their dismissal of her had just given her access to information that could change everything. The question was, what was she going to do about it? Maya Johnson hadn't always been invisible. 2 years ago, she had been Maya Johnson, software engineer at TechFlow Solutions, wearing tailored blazers instead of server uniforms, commanding respect in boardrooms instead of clearing plates in silence. She had graduated summa cum laude from MIT, with a degree in computer science and a minor in business ethics, a combination that had seemed perfectly aligned with her dreams of using technology to create positive change in the world. But the tech industry had other plans for idealistic young black women with inconvenient consciences. The harassment had started subtly at TechFlow. Missed invitations to important meetings, ideas attributed to male colleagues, comments about diversity hires, and lowered standards. When Maya had finally gathered the courage to report her supervisor's increasingly blatant discrimination, the inappropriate comments, the undermined authority, the blocked promotions, she had believed the company would do the right thing. Instead, she found herself facing a choice. Accept a generous severance package with a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement, or fight a legal battle against a company with unlimited resources and a team of lawyers whose job was to destroy her credibility. Maya had chosen to fight. The lawsuit had dragged on for 18 months, consuming her savings, her energy, and eventually her ability to find work in the industry she loved. Tech companies might preach diversity and inclusion in their mission statements, but they shared information about troublesome employees through informal networks that could blacklist someone permanently. By the time TechFlow finally settled, paying her a fraction of what the case was worth while admitting no wrongdoing, Maya's career in technology was over. No company would hire someone who had sued their previous employer, regardless of the merit of the case. That settlement money was supposed to be a fresh start. Instead, it became a lifeline as Maya struggled to find any work at all. The serving job at Elite Catering was meant to be temporary, just something to pay the bills while she figured out her next move. That was 8 months ago. Now, as she stood in the shadows of the Metropolitan Hotel's ballroom, Maya thought about the apartment she was struggling to afford, the student loans that never seemed to get smaller, the phone calls from her mother asking when she was going to get back to your real job. Her mother, who had worked double shifts at a hospital for 20 years to send Maya to MIT, who believed that education and hard work were enough to overcome any obstacle. Her mother, who still didn't understand why her brilliant daughter was serving drinks instead of changing the world. The stakes couldn't be higher. Maya was 3 months behind on rent, despite working 60-hour weeks between 2 catering jobs. Her landlord had already issued 1 eviction notice. Her car was 1 missed payment away from repossession. The health insurance she'd lost when TechFlow fired her meant every headache was a potential financial catastrophe. But it wasn't just about money. Every day Maya spent invisible in rooms full of powerful people was a day she wasn't using her talents, her education, her purpose. She had been trained to solve complex problems, to build systems that could help millions of people. Instead, she was memorizing wine pairings and perfecting the art of being ignored. The most painful part was watching other people like Marcus Blackwood, profit from the very hypocrisy that had destroyed her career. He stood at podiums talking about equality while his legal team worked overtime to silence the voices of people who tried to speak truth about discrimination in his company. Maya knew the pattern intimately because she had lived it. The subtle harassment that escalated over months. The documentation that was dismissed as misunderstanding. The colleagues who suddenly stopped making eye contact. The HR department that treated victims like problems to be solved rather than people to be protected. She recognized the names Peterson had whispered to Blackwood. Johnson, Williams, Rodriguez, Thompson. These weren't just legal settlements. They were lives disrupted, careers ended, dreams deferred or destroyed. Each of those names represented someone like her, someone who had dared to speak up and paid the price. And now she was watching the man responsible for this systematic silencing being celebrated as a champion of justice. The injustice of it burned in her chest. But Maya had learned hard lessons about the cost of speaking truth to power. Her lawsuit against TechFlow had been righteous and necessary, but it had also been career suicide. Fighting the system had left her barely surviving on its margins. But tonight was different. Tonight, she had information that could expose not just one company's discrimination, but an entire network of cover-ups and paid silence. The question was whether she had the courage to use it, knowing that doing so would likely cost her the little stability she had managed to rebuild. As she watched Marcus Blackwood bask in undeserved praise, Maya realized that her invisibility had become her greatest asset. These powerful people had dismissed her so completely that they had conducted their criminal conspiracy right in front of her. They had no idea that the furniture had been taking notes. Do I risk everything I have left to expose the truth? Or do I stay silent and survive? The confrontation began, as many turning points do, with something small. Maya was clearing the final course plates when Marcus Blackwood's phone, buzzing constantly throughout the evening, finally captured his full attention. She watched his face change as he read the screen, his practiced smile cracking for just a moment. "Shit," he muttered, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "Problem, Marcus?" asked Mayor Richardson, seated to his right. Blackwood forced the smile back into place. "Nothing that can't be handled." "Excuse me for just a moment." He stood abruptly, nearly knocking over his wine glass. Maya, standing just behind his chair, instinctively reached out to steady it, her quick reflexes preventing a spill that would have stained his expensive tuxedo. Instead of gratitude, she received a sharp look of irritation. "Watch yourself," Blackwood snapped. "This isn't a soup kitchen. Try to move with some grace." The comment was loud enough to draw attention from surrounding tables. Maya felt every eye in the vicinity turn toward her, some amused, others embarrassed for her, most simply indifferent. She had become a momentary entertainment, a brief break in their elegant evening. "Yes, sir," Maya replied quietly, her training keeping her voice steady despite the humiliation burning in her chest. But as Blackwood stepped away to take his call, Maya noticed his phone had fallen from his jacket pocket onto the chair. The screen was still lit, displaying a cascade of urgent messages that painted a picture of a crisis in motion. She should have simply informed him, should have called his attention to the dropped device, and stepped back into her role as invisible help. Instead, Maya found herself reading. Channel 7 interview scheduled for tomorrow. Rodriguez went public. Full discrimination lawsuit details. Legal, stock down 3% in after-hours trading. Investors spooked by discrimination headlines. CFO board meeting called for Friday. They want answers about settlement patterns. Peterson. The messages kept coming, each one revealing more of the disaster unfolding in real time. Marcus Blackwood's carefully constructed image was crumbling, and Maya was watching it happen from the inside. "Excuse me," came a sharp voice behind her. Maya turned to see Victoria Whitmore standing with her arms crossed, a look of obvious disgust on her face. "Are you seriously reading that man's private messages?" Maya's heart stopped. She had been caught. No ma'am, I was just—" She was what? Blackwood's voice cut through the ambient noise as he returned from his call. His eyes immediately went to his phone in Maya's proximity, then to her face, then to the growing circle of attention around them. "This woman was reading your personal messages," Mrs. Whitmore announced loudly, as if she were reporting a crime. "I saw her clear as day, going through your phone while you were away." The accusation hit Maya like a physical blow. Around them, conversations stopped. Phones appeared as guests began recording what promised to be an entertaining confrontation between a billionaire and a server caught snooping. "Is that true?" Blackwood's voice was dangerously quiet. Maya felt trapped. Denying it would be a lie, but admitting it would be professional suicide, and possibly legal trouble. She could see the calculations happening in Blackwood's eyes. A server with access to sensitive information about his legal troubles was a threat that needed to be neutralized immediately. "Sir, your phone fell when you stood up. I was only trying to read my private communications." His voice rose now, playing to the crowd. "Do you have any idea what confidential information you may have just compromised? The legal liability you've just created?" Maya felt the familiar sensation of walls closing in, the same feeling she'd had at TechFlow when she'd realized the system was designed to crush anyone who didn't play along. But this time, something was different. This time, she wasn't alone in a sterile conference room facing corporate lawyers. This time, the truth was being exposed in front of hundreds of witnesses. "I know about the settlements," Maya said quietly. The effect was immediate and electric. Blackwood's face went pale, and the murmur from the crowd shifted from amusement to interest. "What did you say?" His voice was tight with controlled fury. Maya took a breath, realizing she had just crossed a line she couldn't uncross. But maybe it was time to stop retreating. "I said I know about the settlements. Johnson, Williams, Rodriguez, Thompson. The discrimination lawsuits you've been paying millions to hide while you stand up here talking about equality." The ballroom had gone almost completely silent now. Phones were recording, society reporters were taking notes, and Maya could see Peterson frantically trying to push through the crowd toward his boss. "You have no idea what you're talking about," Blackwood said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "And you're about to find yourself facing serious legal consequences for invasion of privacy and corporate espionage." "Corporate espionage?" Maya's voice grew stronger. "For overhearing conversations you had in public? For seeing text messages you left on display? For listening to you brag about buying off reporters and silencing victims?" "That's enough!" Blackwood's composure finally cracked completely. "Security! I want this woman removed immediately. And someone call the police. She's made threats. She's accessed confidential information, and she's clearly unstable." But Maya wasn't backing down anymore. The fear was still there, but it was being overwhelmed by something else. A clarity she hadn't felt since before TechFlow destroyed her career. "Threats?" she called out, her voice carrying across the silent ballroom. "The only threat here is to your reputation, Mr. Blackwood, and it's not coming from me. It's coming from the truth." She turned to address the crowd directly, many of whom were now openly recording the confrontation. "This man just spent 20 minutes telling you about his commitment to equality and justice, but I've spent the evening listening to him discuss cover-ups, payoffs, and silencing victims of discrimination at his company. While he was accepting applause for his philanthropy, he was orchestrating a media blackout of stories about systematic racism at Blackwood Industries." "She's lying," Blackwood shouted, but his desperation was obvious now. "She's a disgruntled employee trying to—" "I don't work for you," Maya cut him off. "I'm just someone you ignored completely while you conducted your criminal conspiracy right in front of me. Someone invisible enough that you forgot to hide your true nature." Security guards were pushing through the crowd now, but Maya wasn't finished. "You want to call the police? Please do. Let's discuss in public court how much money you've spent silencing victims of discrimination. Let's examine those settlement agreements and their confidentiality clauses. Let's talk about the reporter you tried to buy off an hour ago." Blackwood looked around frantically, realizing that his attempt to intimidate Maya had backfired spectacularly. Every word of this confrontation was being broadcast live on social media. Every accusation was being recorded by dozens of phones. "Do you know who you're dealing with?" he hissed, moving closer to Maya with obvious menace. Maya looked up at him steadily, no longer the invisible server who had begun the evening. Something fundamental had shifted in the power dynamic between them. "The question," she said clearly, her voice carrying to every corner of the silent ballroom. Do you know who you're dealing with? The tension in the ballroom was electric as phones captured every moment of the confrontation. Within seconds, hashtags began forming. Kyan Gala drama, Kyan Blackwood exposed, Nyan Waitress vs Billionaire. The live streams were multiplying exponentially. "I'm calling security to have you arrested," Blackwood snarled, pulling out his phone with shaking hands. "Go ahead," Maya said calmly. "Let's see how that plays out when Channel 7 runs their story tomorrow night. Because, unlike you, I don't have anything to hide." Mayor Richardson, sensing the political danger of being associated with this rapidly unfolding scandal, stood up from the head table. "Marcus, perhaps we should handle this privately." "No," Maya said firmly. "We're way past private. This man has spent millions covering up discrimination at his company while accepting awards for social justice. The public has a right to know." Dr. Sarah Chen, a civil rights attorney seated at table 12, raised her voice. "Ms. Johnson, Maya Johnson. Ms. Johnson, are you alleging systematic discrimination at Blackwood Industries?" Before Maya could answer, Blackwood exploded. "She's alleging nothing. She's a nobody. A server who got caught stealing corporate information. Don't legitimize this circus." But the damage was already done. The word discrimination had been spoken aloud in public by a civil rights lawyer, in front of hundreds of witnesses and dozens of recording devices. Maya's phone, tucked in her apron, began buzzing with notifications. News outlets were already picking up the live streams. Blackwood discrimination was trending. Peterson finally reached his boss, whispering urgently, "Sir, we need to leave, now. This is going viral." "I'm not running from some delusional server," Blackwood hissed back. But Maya could see the panic in his eyes as he looked around at all the recording devices. Channel 7's society reporter, Jennifer Martinez, pushed forward through the crowd. Maya recognized her immediately. This was the reporter Blackwood had been trying to silence all evening. "Mr. Blackwood," Martinez called out, "can you comment on the discrimination settlement patterns at your company?" "No comment," Peterson answered for him, trying to physically block the reporter. "What about the Rodriguez case? Or the Johnson settlement from last month?" Maya felt her heart skip. Johnson. Another person with her same last name. Or was it the Johnson settlement? Maya repeated slowly. "David Johnson, MIT graduate, software engineer at Blackwood Industries until 3 months ago." The blood drained from Blackwood's face. "How do you know about David Johnson?" Peterson demanded. Maya smiled for the first time all evening. "Because David Johnson is my brother." The revelation hit the crowd like a shockwave. Phones swiveled toward Maya, capturing her face as she continued. "My brother, who was hired as a senior developer with glowing recommendations. My brother, who was called Boy by his supervisor despite having 2 degrees and 5 years of experience. My brother, who documented months of harassment before filing a complaint. My brother, who was fired for performance issues 2 weeks later and then had to sign a confidentiality agreement to feed his family." Blackwood was backing away now, his face ashen. That's confidential information covered by legal agreements. Information that becomes public when you discuss it openly at dinner parties," Maya shot back. "Which you did, tonight, in front of everyone here." Dr. Chen stepped forward, her legal instincts activated. "Ms. Johnson, are you saying your brother was forced to sign an NDA about discrimination he experienced?" $2.3 million, Maya said clearly. "That's what it cost to silence my brother. And Williams, $1.8 million. Rodriguez, she went public today, didn't she, Mr. Blackwood? That's why you're having this crisis tonight." Jennifer Martinez was scribbling frantically. "Mr. Blackwood, can you confirm these settlement amounts?" "Security!" Blackwood roared, his composure completely shattered now. "Get these people away from me!" But the security guards were hesitating, clearly unsure about physically removing reporters and guests from a public event that was being broadcast live to thousands of viewers. Victoria Whitmore, who had started this confrontation, now seemed eager to distance herself from it. "Charles, we should go," she whispered to her husband. But Maya wasn't done. The floodgates had opened, and years of suppressed anger and injustice were pouring out. "You want to know what's really confidential?" Maya called out, her voice carrying across the now silent ballroom. "The fact that Blackwood Industries has paid out over $15 million in discrimination settlements in the past 18 months alone. The fact that your diversity initiatives are a PR stunt designed to hide systematic racism. The fact that you've silenced dozens of victims while standing on stages like this, talking about equality." The crowd was completely captivated now. This had gone far beyond a simple confrontation between a billionaire and a server. This was becoming a public reckoning. "And you know what the most disgusting part is?" Maya continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "You destroyed my brother's career, but you didn't destroy his integrity. He's been documenting everything since the settlement. Every victim you've silenced, every NDA you've forced, every cover-up you've orchestrated. He's been building a case that no amount of money can make disappear." Blackwood's face went from pale to purple. "That violates his confidentiality agreement. He'll lose everything." "He already lost everything," Maya said quietly. "You saw to that when you fired him for reporting harassment, just like you've done to dozens of others." Peterson was frantically whispering into his phone while trying to shield his boss from the reporters and cameras. But there was nowhere to hide now. The story was out, being broadcast live, and growing with every passing second. "Mr. Blackwood," Dr. Chen called out formally, "as an attorney specializing in employment discrimination, I'm advising you to stop talking immediately. Anything you say here can and will be used in future legal proceedings." "Future legal proceedings?" Blackwood sputtered. "The class action lawsuit that's about to be filed against your company," Maya said with quiet satisfaction. "See, the thing about NDAs is they don't prevent victims from talking to each other. They just prevent them from talking to the press. But when the information comes out anyway—" Maya pulled out her phone, showing the recording app that had been running throughout the evening. "Every conversation you've had tonight about cover-ups, payoffs, and silencing victims has been recorded. And since you had those conversations in a public space, in front of witnesses, without any reasonable expectation of privacy, that recording is illegal," Peterson shouted. "Actually," Dr. Chen interjected, "in this state, only one party needs to consent to recording a conversation. And since Ms. Johnson was present for these conversations, the legal implications were sinking in for everyone present." Blackwood's attempts to intimidate Maya had backfired spectacularly, creating exactly the kind of public exposure he'd spent millions trying to prevent. As sirens could be heard in the distance, someone had apparently called the police, though it was unclear who. Maya looked around at the crowd of shocked faces. "Did you really think," she asked Blackwood directly, "that you could destroy people's lives without consequences? Forever?" As police officers entered the ballroom, the crowd parted to create a clear path to the confrontation. Maya stood calmly in the center of it all, no longer the invisible server who had begun the evening. She had become something else entirely, a catalyst for justice that had been years in the making. "Officers," Blackwood immediately addressed the police, his voice regaining some of its authoritative tone. "I want this woman arrested for theft, harassment, and corporate espionage. She's stolen confidential information and is making false accusations." Detective Robert Martinez, Jennifer Martinez's husband as it happened, approached the scene with professional calm. "What seems to be the problem here?" "This server has been accessing my private communications and making defamatory statements," Blackwood explained rapidly. "She's clearly unstable and needs to be removed immediately." Maya remained silent, watching as Blackwood tried to use his power and influence to control the situation one final time. "Ma'am?" Detective Martinez turned to Maya. "What's your side of this?" Maya took a breath, then reached into her apron and pulled out a leather wallet. From it, she extracted a card and handed it to the detective. "My name is Maya Johnson, and I'm an investigative journalist for the Washington Herald." The gasps from the crowd were audible. Detective Martinez examined the press credentials carefully, then looked back at Maya with new understanding. "I've been working undercover for 6 months, documenting discrimination and cover-ups in the tech industry," Maya continued, her voice clear and professional. "Tonight, Mr. Blackwood provided me with enough evidence to expose a pattern of systematic discrimination at his company." The transformation was complete. The invisible server was gone, replaced by an award-winning journalist whose investigative series on corporate discrimination had been nominated for a Pulitzer Prize the year before. "That's impossible," Peterson stammered. "She works for Elite Catering. We ran background checks on all the servers." "Maya Johnson, the server, works for Elite Catering," Maya replied calmly. "Maya Johnson, the journalist, has been documenting your employer's crimes for months." The two identities served different purposes. Dr. Chen stepped forward, recognition dawning in her eyes. "You're MJ Johnson. You wrote the expose on Silicon Valley discrimination that brought down TechFlow Solutions." "That's right," Maya nodded. "And TechFlow was just the beginning. The evidence I've gathered over the past 6 months shows that companies across the industry have been using the same playbook. Discriminate, deny, and pay to silence victims." Blackwood was staring at her as if she were a ghost. But you lost everything. Your career was destroyed. You were blacklisted?" "I let you think that," Maya said simply. "The Maya Johnson who sued TechFlow was real. The discrimination I faced was real. The settlement was real. But instead of being silenced by it, I used it as the foundation for the biggest story of my career." She turned to address the crowd directly, many of whom were now recording her every word. "For 6 months, I've been working in the service industry, documenting how the wealthy and powerful behave when they think no one important is watching. Tonight, Mr. Blackwood and his associates provided me with enough evidence to expose not just one company's discrimination, but an entire network of cover-ups, payoffs, and victim silencing." Jennifer Martinez was frantically taking notes. "Maya, can you confirm the settlement amounts you mentioned earlier?" "I can confirm much more than that," Maya replied. "I have recordings of conversations detailing specific cases, names of victims, amounts of settlements, and strategies for media manipulation. I have documentation of attempts to bribe reporters and threaten witnesses. And I have evidence of a systematic pattern of discrimination followed by financial intimidation." Detective Martinez looked at Blackwood. "Sir, these are serious allegations. Do you want to press charges for theft of corporate information?" Blackwood hesitated, clearly calculating the implications. "Pressing charges would mean a public trial, discovery processes that could expose even more damaging information, and months of negative publicity." "The question isn't whether he wants to press charges," Maya said quietly. "The question is whether the district attorney wants to press charges against him for conspiracy to obstruct justice, witness intimidation, and civil rights violations." She pulled out her phone and showed it to Detective Martinez. Every conversation he had tonight about covering up discrimination, silencing victims, and manipulating media coverage was recorded. He conducted these conversations in a public space, in front of witnesses, with no reasonable expectation of privacy. The detective examined the phone, scrolling through hours of recorded conversations. "This is extensive." 6 months of extensive, Maya confirmed. "And Mr. Blackwood just provided the final pieces of evidence I needed." Blackwood seemed to age 10 years in the span of a few seconds. The man who had walked into this gala as a celebrated philanthropist was now facing the collapse of everything he had built. You have no idea what you've done, he whispered to Maya. Maya looked at him with steady eyes, no longer hiding behind the mask of invisibility. I've done exactly what I set out to do, she replied. I've exposed the truth. And sometimes, Mr. Blackwood, the truth is more powerful than all your money and influence combined. The aftermath unfolded with swift and devastating efficiency. Within an hour of Maya's revelation, Blackwood Exposed was the top trending topic nationwide. The live streams from the gala had been viewed millions of times, and news outlets were scrambling to verify and expand on the story. By midnight, Blackwood Industries' stock had fallen 12% in after-hours trading. By morning, it would drop another 23% as investors fled. Detective Martinez took formal statements from Maya, several witnesses, and, reluctantly, from Blackwood himself. The recordings Maya had made throughout the evening provided unprecedented evidence of corporate conspiracy to cover up discrimination. Mr. Blackwood, Detective Martinez said formally, you're not under arrest at this time, but I strongly advise you to retain legal counsel. The district attorney will be reviewing evidence of potential criminal conspiracy charges. Blackwood's lawyer, who had arrived within 30 minutes of the confrontation, was already trying to minimize the damage. My client denies all wrongdoing and will vigorously defend against any false accusations. But Maya wasn't finished. She turned to the crowd of guests, many of whom were still recording. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had just shifted the balance of power. You've witnessed something important tonight. You've seen what happens when systematic injustice is exposed in the light. She gestured toward Blackwood, who stood surrounded by lawyers and security personnel. This man has spent years building a reputation as a champion of equality while simultaneously silencing victims of discrimination at his company. He's used his wealth and influence to cover up crimes while accepting awards for social justice. Dr. Chen stepped forward. Ms. Johnson, what happens next? Next, justice, Maya replied firmly. Tomorrow morning, I'll be filing a comprehensive story with the Washington Herald detailing everything I've discovered. By tomorrow evening, the FBI will have copies of all evidence related to potential civil rights violations. And by the end of the week, there will be a class action lawsuit on behalf of every victim who was silenced by Blackwood Industries' NDAs. She turned directly to Blackwood. You see, the thing about non-disclosure agreements is that they become void when they're used to cover up criminal activity, and discrimination is a crime. Blackwood's face was ashen. You've destroyed everything. Years of work, thousands of jobs, charitable foundations. I've exposed the truth, Maya corrected. You destroyed those things when you chose discrimination over justice. I just made sure the world could see it. Peterson stepped forward desperately. The charity work is real. The donations, the scholarships, the community programs, none of that was fake. Maya nodded. And those programs will continue under new leadership. Because real change doesn't require covering up crimes. It requires accountability. As the police finished taking statements and the crowd began to disperse, Mayor Richardson approached Maya cautiously. Ms. Johnson, the city has several diversity and inclusion initiatives that could benefit from your expertise. Maya smiled sadly. Mr. Mayor, if you want real diversity and inclusion, start by not offering opportunities only after someone proves they have power. 6 months ago, when you thought I was just a server, I had the same knowledge, the same skills, and the same dedication to justice. The only thing that changed tonight was your perception of my worth. The mayor had the grace to look embarrassed. As Maya gathered her things, preparing to leave the ballroom where she had spent months serving in the shadows, Jennifer Martinez approached her. Maya, this story is going to change everything. Not just for Blackwood Industries, but for the entire tech industry. Maya looked around the ballroom one final time, at the tables she had served, the guests who had ignored her. The scene of a confrontation that would reshape corporate accountability. "That's the point," she said quietly. "Sometimes the most powerful weapon against injustice is simply the truth, spoken clearly, at exactly the right moment." 6 months later, the Metropolitan Hotel Ballroom hosted another gala, this one celebrating the passage of the Corporate Accountability in Discrimination Act, landmark legislation inspired directly by the Blackwood Exposé. Maya Johnson sat at the head table. Not as a server this time, but as the keynote speaker. Her investigative series, Invisible Victims: How Corporate America Silences. Discrimination had won the Pulitzer Prize and sparked a national conversation about accountability in corporate leadership. Marcus Blackwood was notably absent. He had resigned from Blackwood Industries 3 days after the gala, facing federal civil rights charges and a class-action lawsuit representing 47 victims of discrimination. The company, under new leadership, had implemented comprehensive reforms and established a victim compensation fund. David Johnson, Maya's brother, had returned to work in tech, this time as Chief Diversity Officer at a startup founded by former Blackwood Industries employees who had been silenced by NDAs. As Maya approached the podium to speak, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. The months of being invisible, of being dismissed and overlooked, had taught her something crucial. Power often comes not from being seen, but from seeing clearly. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice carrying to every corner of the ballroom. "6 months ago, I stood in this room as someone you didn't notice. Tonight, I stand here with a simple message. Justice doesn't require you to be seen by those in power. It only requires you to see the truth clearly and have the courage to speak it." She paused, looking out at the audience of executives, politicians, and activists. Sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one everyone thinks is powerless. Sometimes justice comes not from those who command attention, but from those who pay attention. Maya smiled, remembering that night 6 months ago when everything changed. Sometimes justice flies at 30,000 feet, but sometimes it serves dinner at corporate galas. If this story of courage, justice, and the power of truth moved you, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Maya Johnson's story reminds us that heroes come in all forms. Sometimes they're the people society overlooks, working quietly to expose injustice and create change. What would you have done in Maya's situation? Would you have stayed silent to protect your job, or risked everything to expose the truth? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if you believe in accountability, and share it with someone who needs to hear Maya's story. Together we can ensure that truth always has a voice, no matter how powerful those trying to silence it may seem.